This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everybody. Bruchim Habayim to our Shiur of the Young Israel of Kew Garden Hills. Today's Shiur is sponsored by Mrs. Yudis Nathan, and the Shiurim on Parshas Vayeira are sponsored by our good friend Eliezer Jacobowitz in honor of the wedding of his daughter this week, the Shidduch Zol Oila Yafa Zayin, L'Simcha, L'Mazel, L'Bracha. Okay, so what I just looked up, and I have very good news, and that is this morning, right before the Shiur, I uploaded the first Shiur to podcast. So from here on, besides Torah Anytime, the Shiurim will be on podcast. And the gentleman told me that you could check Monday. It will probably be on Spotify and iTunes and Be'ezus Hashem, slowly other venues as well. And okay, so that's starting Monday. And this year is going to be a Shiur on Parshas Vayeira, but also a continuation of what we call the Bar Mitzvah series. You remember that series? Reb Nassan, we have to put that series also, I think. I don't know if we have that. So this is Bar Mitzvah series number 12. Not that it's predicated on earlier Shurim, but it's actually on this week's Parsha. And let's begin as follows. We're going to go down to the bottom. The pasuk says in the Parsha, Perek Chaf Aleph, pasuk Ches, Vayigdal hayeled, and the child grew. Vayigamal, and he was weaned. Vayas Avraham mishte gadol, and Abraham made a big party. B'yoim higamel as Yitzchak, on the day that he weaned Yitzchak. So the child grew up, and he was weaned, and Avraham made a big mishteh on the day that Yitzchak was weaned. So we would have said, and I believe this is what Rashi says, what kind of Seuda did Avraham make for Yitzchak? How old was Yitzchak? He was 24 months old. He stopped nursing, right? So presumably, the meal that Avraham made was a Seudas Gimul, the day that Yitzchak was weaned at 24 months. However, V'shanino akach b'medrash. Vayigdal hayelad vayigamal, Reb Hoshia Rabba Amar, Nigmal miyetzer hara. Avraham Avinu was weaned, Yitzchak was weaned from his Yetzer hara. When was Yitzchak weaned from his Yetzer hara? Uperush hamatnas kahuna, koloimar ben Yud Gimel Shana Sha'az Ba Yetzer Tov. 13 years old, when the Yetzer Tov comes in. V'hainu mishum, and that is because Shabiyoyma bar mitzvah, nasa gadol, you become a gadol. V'yutztak loimer, and it's correct to say Vayigdal hayeled shenasa gadol b'yoyma bar mitzvah. So here's the thing, you read the pasuk like this, according to the Medrash. Vayigdal hayeled, Yitzchak became a gadol. Vayigamal, and he was weaned off of who? The Yetzer hara. Shenigmo me Yetzer hara. Uveyoymahu, and on that day, Vayas Avraham mishte gadol b'yom higamel es Yitzchak. So basically, Rabbi Sai, what was the very first Bar Mitzvah Seuda in history? Avraham Avinu made a party for Yitzchak Avinu. Bar Mitzvah Seuda. Okay, very interesting. So this is Inyana Diyoma for us, and it's certainly of note that this would be the clearest and the only explicit mention in the Chumash that for a Bar Mitzvah you're supposed to make a Seuda. Now, I'll tell you an interesting chiddush I had. The Yam Shel Shlomo says that a father is obligated to make a Seuda for his son on the day he becomes a Bar Mitzvah, ki yom shenichnasu l'chuppah, like the day that he enters into the chuppah. So we see from the Magen Avram, quoting the Yam Shel Shlomo, that a Bar Mitzvah boy is like a chasan. Yeah, he's like a groom. In fact, what does it say about a groom? A chasan yechahin pe'er. A groom is donned with glory. So a Bar Mitzvah boy who is like a groom, he puts on his pe'er, he puts on tefillin. So I was thinking, if a Bar Mitzvah boy is like a chasan, then you have to make Sheva brachas for him. So what are the Sheva brachos of the Bar Mitzvah boy? And then Vashem Heir Einai is very simple. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'nasan lanu. That's one. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher nasan lanu Torah. That's two. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher bachar. So he lays half Torah. That's three. Baruch atah Hashem melech haolam tzur kol ha'olamim. Right? That's four. Ne'eman, 5. Magen David, 6. Mikadesh Hashabah, 7. So he's a chasan and he has the Sheva brachas. So that's an interesting idea. But in Ad Kedei Kach, do you say Tachnun on a day that Bar Mitzvah boy puts on tefillin for the first time? Say what? Why would you not say Tachnun? Well, if he's like a chasan, maybe you don't say Tachnun. So it's interesting that Tzitz Eliezer and Reb Nosson Gestetner say, no, you have to put on say Tachnun, because since the minhag is to wear tefillin 30 days before the bar mitzvah, then on the first day he puts on tefillin, it's only practice, and on the first day he makes a bracha, he's been doing it for 30 days. But if your minhag is to put on tefillin by b'yoyim, so then maybe you don't say Tachnun. And in fact, that's what Rabbi Vayeira Yosef writes, that on the day that a bar mitzvah boy puts on tefillin for the first time, the boy and the father would not say Tachnun. Regarding the rest of the shul, you'll ask your local Orthodox rabbi. But the bottom line is, Parshas Vayeira is the makar that you make a Seuda's bar mitzvah. However, here's an amazing question. The Tosfos in Masechta Shabbos says this was not the Seuda that Avraham made for Yitzchak. You know what Seuda Avraham made for Yitzchak? It was his bris milah. V'nei kasher nizboinei nireh says the Sefer B'ni Ata. Sefer B'ni Ata was written by Rav Pinchas Friedman. It's a Sefer on Bar Mitzvah. The whole Sefer is Ma'amorim on Bar Mitzvah of Rav Pinchas Friedman. He asks, if you look in Tosfos in Masechta Shabbos in the name of Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer, Vayigdal hayeled vayigamal vayas Avraham mishtagado b'yom higamal es Yitzchak, that you have to make a Seuda on the day of the Milah, and this is Merumaz in the pasuk b'yom higamal es Yitzchak, b'yom hey gimel mal, when he circumcised Yitzchak on the 8th day, hey higamel, hey gimel mal, he circumcised on the 8th day. So from that pasuk we learn out that you make a Seuda on the day of the Milah. So which one is it? Are you going to learn out that you make a Seuda on the day of the bar mitzvah, like the Medrash Rabbah says, or is it like Tosfos brings from the Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer, that you make a Seuda on the day of the Milah? So it's an interesting stira, and Rav Pinchas Friedman wants to answer the stira with the comments of the Yismach Moshe at the end of Parshas Lech Lecha. Chazal say in Masechta Nedarim, Gedoyla Milah shenichrasu ala shalosh esrei brisas. Great is Milah, that it was sealed on the Milah 13 brisas, 13 covenants. Right? It says the word Bris 13 times by the mitzvah of Milah. Question: why does it say? Why did God make 13 covenants with the Bris Milah? Why is Bris Milah so important that the Rebbeinu Shalom made 13 covenants? Says the Heilige Yismach Moshe, V'nirali, Delakach nichrasu ala Milah yud gimel brisais. This is why it was sealed on the Milah 13 brisais. Because when a person is born, who is crouching at the entranceway of birth? The Yetzer Hara. And how long is the Yetzer Hara residing in a person before the Yetzer Tov kicks in? Yetzer Hara is there 13 years, and the Yetzer Tov comes after 13 years. So it comes out that a person is immersed in sin and tumah. So what protects a person for 13 years when he has a Yetzer Hara and he doesn't have a Yetzer Tov? Can you imagine the guy he's behind the 8 ball. He comes to his bar mitzvah. You know how a bar mitzvah boy is? You have this little kid. He was beforehand this little tiny little boy, and all of a sudden he puts on this borsalino, and he's wearing this jacket, and he's like a different person. Yesterday, try getting him out of bed. The next day, he's jumping out of bed. He can't wait to get to the minyan, right? So, all of a sudden, the Yetzer Tov comes, but the problem is that Yetzer Hara had a 13-year head start. So, what gives a person energy? What gives a person the ability to ward off the Yetzer Hara for 13 years? Says the Yismach Moshe, Gedoyla Mila Shenichrusu Ala Yud Gimel Brisais. The Bris Milah protects a child for 13 years until his Bar Mitzvah. Meaning, when do we know if his Bar Mitzvah, when would we know if a kid's Bris Milah was successful? When could you really celebrate a bris? On the Bar Mitzvah. You don't know at age 12 whether he had a good bris. Because maybe the Mayal only put in 12 years worth. You don't know the bris was good until the Yom Bar Mitzvah. The day of the Bar Mitzvah, now you could tell, what did the Milah accomplish? Gedoyla Milah Shenichrusu Ala Yud Gimel Brisai, says the Yismach Moshe. Now, Nimseinu Lamedim, we learn out from the holy words of the Yismach Moshe, on the day of the Milah, a person is Makabel Shmira for 13 years. Marv Rabbi says the Shvilei Pinchas, according to the Yismach Moshe, we could reconcile the seeming inconsistency between the Medrash Rabbah and Tosfos and the Pikad Rabbi Lezer. Was Avraham celebrating the bris of Yitzchak, or was Avraham celebrating the Bar Mitzvah of Yitzchak? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. It was his Bar Mitzvah. B'yom hi gamel, he was weaned from the Yetzer Hara. But how can we know? We were celebrating his Bar Mitzvah. But how do we know if his Bris Milah was a good bris? When could you really celebrate the bris? It's not until the Bar Mitzvah can we determine whether his Bris Milah was zoicha to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. Ki besudas habris anu noisim shalach v'ayda l'shmoi shenasan lanu mitzvahs milah asher nichrusu ala yud gimel brisus kedei lishmar ala osid shel ha'yeled me'yetzer hara b'meshach yud gimel shana shel yemei ha'katnos. But on the day of the Seuda of Bar Mitzvah, when we're zoicha to bring the child to the Torah mitzvahs, we give Hashem shevach v'ayda. The baby is 13, the child is 13, and we also give a shevach v'ayda that the Bris Milah was able to protect him until now. Says the Shvilei Pinchas, this idea is somewhat alluded to in the Orach Chaim HaKadosh in Parshas Tazria in the name of the Zohar. This is something we briefly discussed in a previous shiur when we talked about egois, a walnut. A walnut has 4 shells. Corresponding to the 4 shells of the walnut, a human being in his foreskin has 4 klipos. At the Milah, we remove 3 klipos. But there's still a bechina that is alluded to in the klipa, and that is, until 13 years old, it's considered that a person is an arla. Because Hashem was magbil, He made a border, a boundary for trees, 3 years. And a person is a Eitz HaSada, 13 years. And in the 14th year, you become Kadosh, you become Netar Ravai. From the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, we see that through Milah we're Mavato Gimel Klipos, but there's still a 4th Klipa that sticks with a child until he's Bar Mitzvah. You hear this? Just like a walnut has 4 Klipos, a human being has 4. 3 are removed at Milah, 1 is removed at Bar Mitzvah. Now we understand the connection between Sudas Milah and Sudas Bar Mitzvah. Sudas Milah separating the removal of 3 klipos, Sudas Bar Mitzvah separating the removal of the 4th klipa. Therefore, the words of Chazal that Avraham Avinu celebrated, Hi Gamel, Hey Gimel Mal, the circumcision of Yitzchak, and B'yom Hi Gamel, on the day that he was removed from his Yetzer Hara. If I remember correctly, I made a bris milah a number of years ago, and I invited the Shvilei Pinchas was in town, and he said this over at the bris, And I believe he added one point, and he said as follows. You could read both pshatim into the pasuk. Both the Medrash Rabbah and the Pirkei de Rebbe Lezer. Vayigdal hayeled vayigamal. The child grew up and he was weaned off the Yetzer Hara at 13. Vayigamal, like the Manas Kahuna says. Nigmal mi Yetzer Hara. Vayas Avraham mishte gadol. So Avraham made a big party. B'yom hi gomel es Yitzchak. On Hey Gimel Mol. For the circumcision of Yitzchak. Vayigamal is he was celebrating the Bar Mitzvah. Higamel is he was celebrating the Bris, but he was celebrating them simultaneously, and both pshatim read beautifully into the pasuk. Okay, Rabbi says, so this is what we call Bar Mitzvah series part 12. And thank you everyone for joining today. I want to wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos and bracha v'atzlacha, and I look forward to seeing you, Be'ezus Hashem, next week. Kol Tov, and great Shabbos.
Remember, where's the makor for the bar mitzvah boy being 13? I think I heard this from you many years ago.
One of them is.
13 come from?
One of them it says by Shimon and Levi.
You're being too erudite.
One second. The Rosh says it's halach l'moshe misinai, and Rashi, I think in Masechta Nazir, says that Shimon and Levi, it says they grew up, and there's a cheshbon, they were 13 years old. That's what I remember.
Well, I heard, and I thought you told this to us.
Yeah.
Before we say Shema Yisrael's up, both here
Oh.
Yisrael Biava. Both here could be Bachor, and the gematria of Ava, Biava, is 13. So when you become a Bachor, when you're 13.
Right.
I think I heard that from
Yeah,
you.
we said that over. That's the Sam Sofer said that at the bar mitzvah of his son. Yeah. So that's like a remez. That's a remez. That's a very nice remez. Shkayach, everyone.
Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.